I'm Ursula Wenhoven from ITU, and I'm delighted to be joined here with my partner in crime, Johanna Joachim, on this series, TechLearnTalk. If you haven't joined us before, this is a series we've been doing over the last couple of years periodically, introducing different digital technologies for a UN audience, demystifying them. They're very much kind of a 101 style. And they also feature examples of how the UN is working with those technologies and opportunities to do so. Today, we have two fantastic speakers, which we can't wait to have you hear from. We have Christina Boetti, who's counsellor on the ITU focus group on the Metaverse, and Samuel Ng, who's digital innovation and scaling lead at UNDP. As you will know, if you've joined this series before, we usually start with a presentation for about 15-20 minutes, which will give an introduction to the technology. Then we pause for a Q&A for about 10 minutes. And then we hear from our second speaker, who today will be talking to us, among other things, about the risks and opportunities for the metaverse. And then we will have a second Q&A for about 15 minutes just before we wrap up. And as we always get asked, let me just share that you'll be able to find the recording for this afterwards and the slides on the UN Innovation Network website, as well as in the webinar library, where you'll also find previous webinars. So without further ado, Christina, can we turn to you? And we're very excited to hear your introduction to the metaverse.
Thank you, Ursula, and thank you, Joanna, for the kind invitation, and thank you to all colleagues for joining us today. I'm very pleased actually to share with all of you a presentation on the metaverse. I just wanted to ask Joanna if one of you can make me presenter, because I don't seem to be able to have share my screen. So if you can make me presenter, that would be great. Or otherwise, I'll let you share my slides, because I cannot do it from here.
Christina, the answer is I'm going to try.
Okay.
It is a little bit difficult because my mouse is not working.
Okay. Maybe Ursula, I think you should have the link to my presentation. Otherwise, I'll.
Yes, I'll work on that. And here, colleagues, is a great juncture where we love this wonderful quote, which is AI is easy, AV is hard. So we will.
Here it is. Here it is. I got the function, so that should be fine. Okay. Here we go. Technology. So I'll bring you to the metaverse, but you see, in this universe, we still have technical challenges to deal with. So, and starting with the metaverse is coming. For those of you that are not very familiar, this is the new buzzword in the tech world. So it's really the latest technology, and I'm delighted actually to share with you some of the exciting potential opportunities that this new technology may bring, but also some of the challenges.
Christina, so I don't think we have sound on the video. Was it meant to have sound? And if not, you want to maybe just narrate us through?
It was meant to have sound. Can you hear the sound now?
No, I think there's a Zoom, a box when you're sharing your
I share it
screen,
actually with the sound.
There is a button that says enable sound. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that I did enable it. So let me try again. Can you see my screen now? So it should be enabled here.
Yeah, we can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, so let us try again. If you cannot hear it, let me know.
That is still no sound.
Never mind. I'll tell you actually what it is saying. So the metaverse is really something which is actually being defined right now. There's not internationally agreed definition, and as you can see actually from the subtitles on this video, even at the industry level, there's no agreement of what the metaverse really is, but certainly there's agreement on the fact that it's really the next evolution of the internet, and in a sense is also enabling users to being able to interact in a three-dimensional way. With all of that, of course, it brings a lot of new opportunities, and there's a possibility for users to meet and be able to interact as holograms, as the president of Microsoft is mentioning, but is also envisaging the possibility of not having one metaverse, but multiple metaverses. And that's the reality that we are going to face. So the idea of talking of metaverse in reality is when we really look at the different platforms that we have available now, and that at some point they'll be able actually to interoperate, to become interoperable, and certainly to give the users the opportunity actually to enjoy the possibility of using these technologies fully. So now the issue that is at stake is how we are able to use these platforms, noting that there are different norms. And one of the suggestions that it is being made is to have some sort of rating systems, similar to what we are familiar with, for example, with TV, and or letting the user know that there are different norms that regulate the different platforms, so that, as you can see from the example that is being given right now, if you go to a playground, you are expected to have some social norms, which are very different if you go to a bar or to a theater. So the same will have to be applied in the metaverse. So now the issue is how we are able actually to create a metaverse that is able actually to allow users leaving no one behind and not creating an additional digital divide. So in all of this, that brings us a bit to what it is, the metaverse per se. And in that is right now based on a series of technologies, including virtual reality, augmented reality, and also Web3, and leveraging all these three technologies together with the IoT, the digital twin, and the artificial intelligence, we will be able actually to enjoy this new immersive experience. The metaverse itself is a new area of innovation which started actually in 1992. Yes, 1992. It's actually a pretty, a couple of years ago. That this word first appears actually in a novel, in a fiction novel that is called Snow Crash. And that basically was described as a technology that supported a virtual world where people could live, work, and play. Now, since that, a lot has happened. New platforms have been created, including, for example, the Decentraland. We have seen very recently Facebook that changed its name into Meta. We have also seen that in cities and governments that have put in place strategies towards these new technologies. And in general, including the United Nations, industry, academia, I've started to discuss this issue and this new technology, and how that entails to be able to enjoy it fully. So the metaverse, contrary to what many people may think, It's not only about games, and it's not really just a game, but it is a game changer, and potentially is a game changer also on the economy. It is estimated that 25% of people will spend over 1 hour a day in the metaverse by 2026. And it is predicted that the metaverse will grow in the market in the upcoming years. Now, there are various sources that predicted that the metaverse can generate over 800 billion US dollars in the global metaverse revenue opportunity in 2025. And considering, of course, this potential market opportunity, it appears clear that the metaverse is really no longer science fiction, but can become really a game changer in the worldwide economy. Now, some of you may ask, how do I access the metaverse? You know, what it is really to go or to be in the metaverse. Now, without pretending to support any specific platform, but just for the purpose of this presentation, I've captured a few screenshots, just trying to access one of the several platforms. So you'll see just the example of the Decentraland, but similarly, you have a similar process whether you want to access, I don't know, Roblox or Meta or Minecraft. So if you, for example, go to the Decentraland website, and we take it, as I said, just as an example, you know, you choose your access type to the Decentraland metaverse. So you can prefer to continue with either your browser, or you can use like a dedicated application. And then once you have chosen your access type, you have two other options. One option is to continue as a guest, and the other one is that you can continue with your crypto wallet to the Decentraland. Now, if you opt to use a guest account, you can continue actually the next step without any other process. But if you want to save your data, then you need to connect to a MetaMask wallet with the central metaverse. So after you basically sign in the process, you can choose your avatar, and you're free to choose and customize your avatar in the way as you wish. You can see on the screen that there are various, you know, options. And then once you select basically the avatar, you can name it. So it's really going into a sort of personalization, you know, having you in the metaverse, and you can now explore the various virtual towns, buildings, you know, cafe, etc. And then, you know, they have a virtual assistants that can guide you. So as you can see, it's pretty simple in terms of what it requires to be. It's not necessary to have the VR headsets for all platforms. So some of them, of course, you'll need to have a VR headset to fully enjoy the experience. For others, that's not the case. So the underlining metaverse technologies is that the metaverse per se is not dependent on one specific technologies, but there are various technologies that support its layers, and that, you know, everything starts really with the infrastructure. You know, unless you have really good infrastructure, you know, that will be very difficult. So the adequate infrastructure network is necessary. So that's why they are really at the heart of the metaverse. The other tiers include the experience, the discovery, the creator economy, the spatial computing, and of course the last one is certainly the human interface that, you know, that gives immediately the relationship and contact with what this new technologies brings in. The overall metaverse ecosystem keeps growing. So the image that you see on the slides, it just gives you a glimpse of the many key players that are being part and are continuing actually to add in this ecosystem. So including I would say the traditional providers of gateways, the social and meeting apps that we are, most of us are many familiar with, including, for example, Zoom that we are using today for this presentation, to the LinkedIn, adding to the various actually user interface and immersion companies that provides actually the supporting services. The companies and technologies from all these spheres need to come together to build an ecosystem where people and business can interact, work, socialize, entertain, and also be able to transact. And this metaverse ecosystem is complex. It is rapidly changing, and also the fact that we have so many companies that are part of the same ecosystems bring in a series of additional challenges, including interoperability, security, that will have to be considered. Now, if we look, for example, at some of the I would say practical applications, we'll see that, for example, we have consumer metaverse, where basically we look at digitalized lifestyle for people. So it's really, for example, how do we use the metaverse for educational purposes? How do we use it, for example, for work purposes, like having meetings in the metaverse? How much interactive it could be. If we look, for example, at the industrial metaverse, we look, for example, how it can change the entire supply chain and manufacturing part. So, for example, there's an interesting project between Mercedes-Benz and NVIDIA that is really setting actually the pace in these areas. And we look also at the metaverse in cities. So for example, the city of Seoul or the city of Dubai are having investing in a metaverse, and they look at the metaverse as a way to provide additional e-government services for their own cities. So in a nutshell, the metaverse itself is also a new technologies that can open up new opportunities for both cities and countries to be able actually to achieve the SDGs, especially in sectors like tourism, education, government services, and also retail and real estates. And I don't know whether you are able now to hear this video on Tuvalu, but if not, let me see if it's, can you hear it now?
No, unfortunately.
I don't know what's going on. Why there's not? Let me say again. Okay. Can you hear it now?
We can. Thanks.
As our land disappears, we have no choice but to become the world's first digital nation. Our land, our ocean, our culture are the most precious assets of our people. And to keep them safe from harm, no matter what happens in the physical world, we'll move them to the cloud. Islands like this one won't survive rapid temperature increases, rising sea levels, and droughts, so we'll recreate them virtually.
So this is once again another application of the metaverse. This time, as you can see, the reason behind is actually climate change and the need for a nation to preserve its identity. But metaverse itself, actually, it is being also used with some examples of UN agencies. For example, if I look at one of the recent activities carried out by Unap with the Apollo's edition, which is actually an education platform. and that is being used by teenager between 13 and 18 years old, and that provides really educators with resources to teach students on the importance of environmental protection. And this is just an example, but if for example we wish to consider metaverse also for tourism purposes, we can see that the Seoul metropolitan government recently launched its Metaverse platform, and to allow users to play games, hold meetings, and also receive public documents, and even to visit famous tourist attractions. Now, Seoul is really the first major cities to launch a metaverse platforms also for public services, and now there is really a move from the mayor specifically over the next 5 years to go fully on metaverse in terms of government services. And here, let me show you something that actually it's a real case that happened in Colombia. As we have seen so far, there are really lots of examples on how the metaverse can be used, including in the judicial system, with concrete real case that has consequences in actually in the in our world, not only in the real world, but uh, with the advancement in the metaverse, this digital universe comes also with its own challenges. So the metaverse is right now a sort of, I may call it an uncharted territory, a sort of gray area with the potential to either be beneficial or harmful to those who engage in it. And, some of the challenges can span from interoperability, digital identity, misinformation, child online protection, how we can make sure that, our children, when accessing the metaverse, are, it's a secure space, the need actually also for regulation. And now the metaverse itself can be sustainable. I mean, we all know that to generate the holograms, that we need lots of energy, so um, that also bring us the necessity to ensure that eco design principles are set when the metaverse is made available. So we are really truly at a sort of, what I would say, an inflection point, and even as the UN agencies, we're taking notice, and we're working towards leveraging the opportunity of the metaverse, and also accelerate progress and foster in an age where we work to have people-oriented digital transformation. So although this is really far from being an exhaustive list, and I'd like really to highlight a few of the UN entities, examples that have, somehow approached and used the metaverse for their own also activities. Like, for example, UNESCO in the area of culture has been working with the Saudi Arabian Royal Commission for Alula, to provide experimental tourism in the World Heritage Site of Agra, which is very available also in the metaverse. There is also an example from UNICEF that in partnership actually in Brazil with Metaverse Innovators Hapland, has created a sort of platform that has launched for specific training and education programs for kids. And then we have seen that, for example, UNESCO has launched actually the Metaverse Safety Week to raise awareness about the metaverse. And then very recently, also the International Telecommunication Union, the ITU, has actually held the first meeting of a new focus group on metaverse, which is an open platform open to all, and that and that basically was attended by over 600 participants. This focus group will be working to provide actually the technical ground, and will carry out a pre-standardization work, in particular, on requirements, infrastructure, also on, in looking at the interoperability issues, but we'll also be addressing, issue from policy and regulatory perspective, including safety and security and child land protection. And I'm very pleased to say that it was attended by many UN colleagues actually that have contributed also to shape the focus group structure. It's really a collaborative platform that will really provide in the end a series of technical reports and technical specification. The focus group meeting was preceded by a forum on embracing the metaverse. You can see the videos and also the presentation on the IT website. And I'd like also to take the opportunity to encourage you to subscribe to the mailing list of the focus group. And when we talk about the overall concept of the metaverse and what also will be studied in the focus group, it is essential that we build the new collaboration frameworks that take into account the various layers of the metaverse. So from the digital infrastructure layer all the way to the experience layer. This is especially important since it is really predicted that we will not only see one single metaverse, but we expect to see really numerous, often interconnected metaverses. And in this scenario, there will be really hundreds of metaverses that, that will give the opportunity to users and to all of us actually to benefit and enjoy its full potential. So it becomes imperative that we also collaborate together to be able to create an open, interoperable, inclusive metaverse. And with that, I'd like really to thank you very much for all your attention and apologize for the technical glitches that we had it in this world. I hope that in the metaverse world, it will go a bit better. Thank you.
Fantastic, Christina. Thanks so much. And the questions have been coming in fast and furious. And thanks also to the colleagues who are using the upvote with the clicking on the thumb. So Christina, let's ask you some of these. So the question with the most votes at the moment is, do you see people having a single identity or multiple identities in the metaverse as people jump from space to space?
Well, I think that this brings in the discussion that it is currently happening when we use internet, and the fact that each of us has a possibility actually to create multiple Facebook accounts. It creates, it gives the possibility to have multiple Christinas, and not necessarily the real Christina on and that is one of the issues that will have to be studied. So the digital identity issues is very important. It brings in also another issue, that is, what if we commit a crime in the metaverse? We saw an example before in the video, that there was a concrete case of justice having consequences actually in real world. So what if we commit a crime in the metaverse? Will it have consequences in the real world? Can I heal someone in the metaverse? So these are still unanswered questions, and it will be very very difficult also in a way to give the definitive response now, because that is really something that we will have to study and see what kind of digital identity mechanism we can put in place. We as UN, but also we as users.
Thank you so much, Christina. Okay, the next one is, how do you see social norms, human rights, and other things impacted by the metaverse? And we will, in a little bit, hear from Sam. It's going to talk to us about risks and opportunities. So he may go into this in more detail.
Well, social norms, certainly, and human rights similarly, they will have an impact. And this is so important because that brings in actually the issue of ethics and the importance actually to ensure that there are ethic principles put in place in the metaverse. Right now, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, for every user has the possibility to go on different platforms, but these platforms are not connected. They're not interoperable, which means that in every platforms that you decide to go, you'll have actually to accept the social norms that are included with it. And if there are no social norms, or if, for example, human rights are not respected, that is the situation we face right now. In the next few years, taking into consideration the market opportunity, which is expected to happen, we do believe that with the help of international standards, we will be able actually to have interconnected platforms, and the human rights will have to be guaranteed. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Another popular question is it always animated? For instance, if a doctor shows how to carry out a surgery, will that be animated? Or is it possible to experience as if you were in a real surgery, not animated?
Well, the promise of the metaverse is to go beyond what it is actually right now, the augmented reality or extended reality, which is the animated part, but really to go into the real surgery and actually being able even to perform a surgery at distance. So that will be what it is expected to be the real metaverse. And I'd like to point out that right now, the metaverse, as it is conceptualized, does not exist yet. There are a series of technologies that are somehow giving the user the metaverse experience, which is very different from the idea of being in the metaverse itself.
What about, are there any regulations, principles, guidelines, standards on physical appearance and representation in the metaverse?
Not now. For the time being, there's no regulation that has been put in place anywhere. There are a series of actually strategies that have been put in place, like for example, the Dubai strategy, which look into consideration actually these aspects. But regulation per se, the European Commission is working on a series of actually possible regulatory actions in this area, but not for the time being. There's nothing that has been made available.
Okay, and then another popular question, how is, for example, the Facebook metaverse substantially different from, for example, a Second Life, which was a big boom at some point and then just disappeared into the internet? And why should it work this time?
Well, so concerning the first part, why the Facebook is one of the platform that, for example, requires the VR headset to experience the metaverse, and in a sense somehow wants to leverage on the Facebook already users, so that the idea behind was to transition the Facebook users to the metaverse in the real meaning. That has not happened yet, because many of us may have a Facebook account but do not necessarily have decided to buy VR headset yet. So that's the first thing. The second part of the questions on, why this time it should work compared, maybe it's the timing issue and the fact that, for example, if I can make an analogy, a couple of years ago, artificial intelligence has been used and studied for the last 30 years, but I think the real boom happened about 5 years ago. And since then, now, when we heard about ChatGPT, no one really questioned what ChatGPT is, but the question was, oh, how can I use it? What's neat for me? Which is the timing issue. So probably Metaverse will benefit from the same analogy. Right now, it seems that it might be consumers are a bit more familiar with, so we are really ready or potentially ready for that. Then if the Meta platform will work, I don't know.
Thanks so much, Christina. So as is our normal practice, we'll pause the Q&A for now and we'll turn to our second speaker, and then we'll come back for some more Q&A. And in the interim, Christina, if you do see Q&As there that you want to type a response to, that's fabulous. Everyone keep your questions coming and do post them in the Q&A. And if you've got anything to share, you can share that in the chat. So without further ado, let's turn to Sam Ng, who's Digital Innovation and Scaling Lead at UNDP, for his presentation on risks and opportunities. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Ursula. And hey, thanks, Christina. That was an excellent sort of overview, I think, on the metaverse. I'm going to attempt what we do nowadays in the digital world, which is to cram you full of more information, as if it wasn't enough in the last 40 minutes, and really just talk about some of the risks. I see a few questions that have touched on this, but I think more importantly, not just the risks and the challenges that we see, but what are some of the responses we can begin to think about. So before we start, it'd be good to get a bit of a sense, and it's probably a little bit tricky to do this, but how many people have actually experienced the metaverse? So if you have, like, you can just put like a yes or something in the chat, so a rough idea of who our audience is. Oh, there you go, better still, poll. Okay, who's been in the metaverse? Ooh, here we go. Predominantly no, mostly, yeah, definitely mostly no. All right, okay. Well, for the majority of you who haven't been in the metaverse, let me show you what the metaverse looks like according to Google. It looks like this. We're all going to be living in cities. Everything is impeccably clean. There are lots of lasers everywhere, it appears, and they're going to be flying robots. So this is our current perception of the metaverse. Luckily, or perhaps unluckily, depending on your point of view, I guess, this is a picture of a different kind of reality. This is perhaps much more of a reality of the sort of places that we and our colleagues tend to work in on a more regular basis. So I want to maybe just even start this talk by bringing a couple of people who are not in this conversation at the moment. So I want to start with the picture on the left, which is a fabrication. It's a fictional picture of a guy called Tane, who's 14. He lives in a low-income part of New Zealand, which is a rich country. But here he's got fairly limited access to data because he has to top up his phone and his devices, not necessarily always reliable because it's a cheap one. And then we've got Anima, who lives in central Chad. She's a mum of 4. They're a family of goat herders. She doesn't have a phone. She's also illiterate, so it's hard for her to use a phone. And of course, her husband has a phone, but it's what we might call a dumb phone. And she very occasionally gets to use that. Now, these are 2 people which I think, if you take nothing else from what I'll say, I hope it's not new to you. This will be fairly familiar to ground, but it's useful just to ground a lot of, I think, our optimism, but also concerns about new technologies and the realities of those places in which we work. And I want you just even as homework to think of one person at the opposite end of the technology spectrum for you. It could be, like in my case, my mother-in-law. We found how difficult it is in reality to even use the technologies. Just think of some of the people and what that sort of means to them as we kind of think about the metaverse. So here we have this challenge then of, on one hand, these kind of perceptions of what the metaverse could be and the reality of the places in which we work. So from that perspective, I guess I'd like to talk about a couple of high-level risks. One, which we've already touched on, which is this challenge of the digital divide. And we'll start and dive into that. And the other one, which is what I've kind of termed the reality divide, and this ongoing and increasingly difficult, I think, challenge for us to know what exactly is real and what is not real. So let's just kind of start with the obvious. So it is incredibly exciting. If you start Googling around, you'll see some interesting kind of use cases for what we could do with the metaverse, which again, in my mind, isn't a single technology. It's actually a collection of a lot of different things. But here's a fairly well publicized and sobering statistic as well from ITU, right? That there's still 2.7 billion people who don't have that option, who don't have the option to get online. They don't have electricity. They still currently don't necessarily even have the literacy. In many cases, the ability to get online. Most of those, of course, like Nima, are women or girls, in fact, and they disproportionately live in rural areas. And then there's 5.3 billion people, perhaps a little bit like Tane or ourselves, who live in parts of the world where there is connectivity, but we may not, we won't, or we don't access the metaverse for a range of different reasons. You can see here too, there's a best estimate as to the number of people who have experienced the metaverse in some capacity, and there's again lots of different ways of looking and measuring that. But one of the key things, I mean, you might ask, so what? We've known about this all along. One of the sort of big implications of this, as we see the capability of not just the metaverse, but many different forms of emerging technology grow, there's a very real risk we kind of create a class of, I mean, I'm being very broad here, but a class of superhumans, people like yourself and those of us on the call who can do so much more than ever we imagined possible, and those who do not. And that these digital or technology prosthetics, if you like, somewhat transforming us into these kind of cyborgs, really will increase in quality at a pace that would make social media platforms seem like child's play. So that is a really real reason for us to not just from a moral perspective care about the digital divide for people like Tane and for Nima, but to actually think about what this might mean for those who are in control of these platforms. I'll skip this one really briefly because most of you probably already know this. What are some of the big drivers? Obviously, the cost of hardware, even connectivity over Zoom, as COVID has shown, there's still a long way to go to make that ubiquitous. But then there's a range of other reasons too. Some of the softer and less obvious reasons which apply, be that a connection for Zoom or especially so for something like the metaverse. But I won't dwell there because I think what's probably new is this question of the digital divide. Sorry, not the digital divide, the reality divide. We've seen more recently, we've talked about generative AI, the ability for us to create videos, images, and of course, text artificially. And we'll probably see another leap of that in the week ahead as GPT-4 is going to be released. But let me give to you a scenario, possibly a real scenario where in the near future, you are walking down a virtual street. Maybe that's the Centraland, maybe that's Second Life, maybe it's whatever. or actually you're walking down a real street through augmented reality glasses. And for me, I might be walking down the street and I overhear a couple of people just talking about this e-bike that's parked up against the side of the street. I can't help but notice that they are extremely enthusiastic, and admittedly that e-bike looks pretty amazing. I use the e-bike example because that is something that's quite real to me. And I walk away thinking, wow, that does seem pretty awesome. Maybe I should think about buying that e-bike. And as I walk away, there are all kinds of sensors, right? The watch that I'm wearing, the kind of eye tracker that's on my hardware. And in fact, it's picking up micro expressions and my pulse. It's picking up just even my dilation, my pupils, and a ton of biometric data that feeds into these highly kind of powerful and scary predictive models about my emotions. And so we're left with this kind of challenge and this question of, do those two people that I walked past with the e-bike, was that even real? Was that something that other people experienced, or was that dynamically created just to appeal and persuade me to perhaps make a purchase? And the emotions that I felt as I was walking past that e-bike, was that something that I willingly shared? Was that something I even knew about myself, or was that already extracted from the systems around me? And now this does admittedly sound quite dystopian, but the way in which the technology is going at the moment very much allows for this reality to take place. And in fact, don't just take my word for it, but in the bottom kind of right corner here, you'll see a quote from Avi, who is one of the founders of HoloLens, which was one of the first kind of headset units that Microsoft partnered with. And he basically talks about the fact that this is the closest thing we've got to creating reality short of a direct neural connection. And the more the computers understand us, the greater the manipulation. So it is a very real thing. It's not right now, it is on the horizon. So let me then I'll try and close with this. So it's pretty easy to, in fact, pick apart all the problems and point them out. And that is an important thing to do, and that is something we should all be doing a lot more of. But the valuable thing here is actually doing something about it, even if our first attempts don't necessarily work. The attempt itself is important. But best of all, if we can anticipate some of these problems and get ahead of them, nullifying any problem at all, that would be best. And that is, for me, one of the values of a network like the UN Innovation Network, is for us to think about and anticipate some of these issues. So practically 3 things in whatever field you're working in, I think that would be relevant, hopefully, to you. One is, of course, we do need to advocate for Nima and for Tane, who aren't in this call. We need to continue advocating for digital inclusion. And we've talked a bit about this, the idea of human rights, how they are manifest, not just in the real world, but also how they translate into these ever complex digital worlds in which we live. And we've done some work around thinking about that, and we would welcome partners to support that. A big part of all of that, I think, is just this idea of digital public infrastructure. We're all going to share the same internet. We're all going to share a common set of goods. How do we build that collectively? And maybe most relevant for everyone here is to think about the evolution of innovation as these new technologies evolve. And can we begin shifting from a mindset where we've got the solutions and the technology is here to, save us all, to perhaps playing a more supportive role and allowing innovations to emerge at a particular time and place, whatever that happens to be. So I'll pause there. There are some very specific things we can do, but maybe we'll get into it as well in the Q&A. So
fantastic, Sam. Thank you so much. Lots of opportunity and lots of risks as well. I see people commenting, wow. And thanks so much to Christina, who's also been answering some of the questions. I think some of the questions in particular are pretty important, and perhaps others would also like to see them. So maybe we can recap some of those, and these can be for both you, Sam, and for Christina. Like, for instance, one of them is, can you name some of the challenges you envisage the metaverse can have in international security? We've started to see the challenges posed by AI, particularly in autonomous weapon systems. Yeah, I don't know if you have a thought for that, Sam. Do you want to say something?
I guess we can view security from the perspective of human rights as well, and privacy is probably the greatest invasion of human rights that's easy to observe. And then there is kind of real world security as well as kind of cyber security from the perspective of warfare. And I suspect you're kind of referring to the weaponization of technologies in general. Yeah, that is quite a present sort of a threat, and the lack of regulation or recourse makes it extremely difficult. And I think this is part of what we need to get our heads around as a global community, to figure out how we might be able to provide incentives for that not necessarily to happen, but also definitely, you know, design some sticks. I think ID, I mean, this question was touched on before, ID is a pivotal piece in that. The metaverse is actually a collection of a range of different technologies, and how we are looking at identity from the perspective of decentralized identities, more controllable and transparent forms of information provenance is going to be a big part of that. But in terms of concrete answers, yeah, as UNDP, we don't work so much under the kind of realm of weaponization of digital technologies.
Thanks so much, Sam. Another one as well, which has come up, very important. I think the metaverse has tremendous potential for people with disabilities. What is being done to make sure this technology realizes its inclusive potential?
I'd love to pick that one up really briefly too, and then pass it to you, Christina. That is an area that I'm super excited by. Not to downplay it, but I think the ability for languages to no longer be a barrier, and literacy no longer to be a barrier, and some of the biases we have around appearances and even accents to be these barriers. There's just so many potentials for that to happen. Physical disabilities, one in 5 people around the world have some kind of physical disability that prevents equality. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to create a solution people want to go to, as opposed to kind of mandate necessary requirements, which of course we also need to do, but I think it's more attractive to design solutions that are appealing to use. But yeah, Christina?
Thank you. Maybe to add on that also the fact that, for example, users can increase the visual context. So, for example, adjusting the direction and volume of signs, and, meeting even accessibility needs that now are difficult. So I think that opens up really a lot of also opportunities, including, the sign language interpretation, including the fact that, the metaverse itself right now is also somehow being rebuilt, if I can say, because when we will look at the interoperability issues, accessibility will be one of the key requirements that will have to be considered.
Thanks, Christina. Both of you, the next most popular question is, how will advancement in use of the metaverse balance inequalities that still exist as far as the digital divide is concerned? I mean, new divides are being created. Will it not widen the divide? And what are the costs of that?
Well, I think that it was mentioned partially by Sam at the beginning of his presentation. I think that there is one prerequisite that has to be, the availability of, the technology. We need to make sure that, technology is available. Otherwise, the divide will increase rather than decrease. And that's the definitely the step number one. If I can quote, for example, what it was said by the CTO of Nokia just last week that attended that spoke at our forum. One of the things that was mentioned is that if there's not a proper network, there will be no metaverse at all. And that goes back to the basics, where we need to have the affordability of ICT services made available to people to be able to deliver the necessary services and use technologies, including the metaverse. In terms of the inclusivity, which goes, a bit beyond the accessibility, I'd like also to mention that the metaverse offers also an opportunity to bring in different opportunity for people to be able to participate, as it was also highlighted in the video on the hearing case, that can be more on an equal footing, and that can also give an opportunity for people to have equal opportunities to participate. So it can be used even for, for example, if I look at cities participatory decisions, not only consultations or the accessibility in the broader terms. Sam, maybe you would like to add something on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty clear. This is going to make things worse. I will just be pretty blunt about it. This is, I mean, we just have to go to my example of Nima in Tane. You will know people like this. Just look at how difficult it was for us, not just on this call, but in general, to use technology. It's so much more than just the physical hardware requirements. So all the societal infrastructure that makes the digital divide a very real thing. And I think beyond the moral argument, we really got serious and think about the kind of small amount of people that control these platforms. And in our current web, we realize this does not work out very well. How can we make sure we don't amplify and create this kind of lock-in? Because this is exactly where we're headed. That's why it's an urgent conversation that needs to be had. And we need to move just also beyond the obvious things about hardware and accessibility, and really talk about some of the kind of more subversive things to do with literacy as well as policy.
Well, on that note, I think there's definitely lots of other topics as well for future TechLearnTalks, including I see some questions about generative AI for future topics. In order to wrap up by the time, I would just like to say thanks so much, Sam, and thanks so much, Christina, and to reiterate to everybody that we will have the recording and the slides, including video with sound, available for you afterwards in the webinar library on the UN Innovation website. So thanks, and sorry for those we didn't get to answer all of the questions. Perhaps we can circulate those to Sam and Christina and see if we can get some more answers for the ones that we didn't manage to get to. So with that, and also on behalf of Johanna Joachim and the UN Innovation Network and ITU, please enjoy the rest of your day.